Tony,
Yes, sir.
we in the house, man.
Yep.
This is it. The Difference Live.
Where we at?
And we are in Tempe, Arizona, of all places. Out here, had the team set up. Have the team set up an opportunity for us to come out and record the audio book to book number 3.
Yep.
Book number 3. Me.
That's it.
Book number 3.
After you said you wasn't coming back here.
I definitely said I was never coming back here again. We was out here, I keep saying 4 years, but it was 5 years ago. It was straight up 5
Really?
years ago, yeah. And I came out here to record 2 books during the same time. And I just remember it being absolutely hectic and crazy and tiring. And I hated it. And I was like, now I understand why people hire people to do the recording of their audiobooks, because some people might like it, some people are gifted at it. I hated every minute of it afterwards. And the crazy thing is, I plan everything late. So I think I planned that trip. I didn't have people at the time to do that stuff for me. So I didn't even have a hotel room. I literally got to Phoenix or wherever I stayed, and it wasn't until I actually got to the city that I go on my phone on an app, get a freaking from like hotels.night or hotels.com,
Yeah.
and got a hotel room, and but was carrying my suitcase around the whole damn city. So it was just wild. I got out of recording my last session super late because we ran over. Went to bed at like 1 in the morning. Had to be up at 4 to fly back home to California so that I could be at my daughter's. She was doing like a recital, so I could be at her recital at 8 a.m. And I just remember telling our book team, I was like, bro, I'm never doing that again, ever. And that was 5 years ago. And here we go.
Yep. 5 years later. Now, what do you feel? We just finished day 1.
Yep.
Right. What do you feel? Because you ask us this all the time, like after our challenges, after
Yeah.
certain calls,
Yeah.
like your takeaways, right?
Yeah.
Like
what
what-
went well?
What went well and
What
what
would you
didn't.
change?
Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. What went well? You always start off on a positive note. You know, what went well? Man, that we're here. The whole squad is here. The whole Think Life is Different team is basically here, outside of Lou, who is in Florida. But that's what went well. It's just seeing everybody represent, you know, like Sabrina and Linda didn't have to come out, but they show so much love. That went well. The setup, I think Jordan and his team did a good job of getting us set up. I felt comfortable. I actually liked this time. Last time they had me reading off of an iPad. This time they had a monitor. I actually like reading off the monitor better. And I like the support. You know, I think Joe is the kind of sound or audio manager.
Audio engineer. Yeah.
Yeah. So, man, that guy is great. Like, he is really good at his job, because it's more than just the technical part of it. It's a lot of people management, too.
Yeah.
So I know that I was not easy the first hour, probably the first half an hour to an hour of being there. But his ability just to have a cool and level head, he wasn't getting upset when I was taking too long, when I was complaining, wanting to leave. You know, he was just cool, calm, and level headed.
Yeah.
And then having some breathing there, of course, it really helped too, and that went well because they could coach you through moments of feeling like, what am I doing here? And me and you talk about this a lot. Like, I still have so many moments to where I'm just like, I'm still questioning and have imposter syndrome even after writing 2 books before this. I'm still like, who am I to be, you know, recording a book? But so their coaching and their encouragement, What also went well was having you there, right? I mean, the man behind the scenes, but making everything look crisp and beautiful and putting everything together. I wish we would have had that the last time around, but we didn't. And the material is really good. It's so funny when when you're reading an audio book, because even though you're part of the writing process, it still feels new a lot of the times, you know. And even though I've read the manuscript several times at this point, not all the way through, but no, I have read it all the way through, but it still feels super new.
Yeah.
And just to get in character, like that went really well. What would I change? Probably being a little bit more prepared, mentally, for one. Even though I knew what was coming, I think I had a little bit of PTSD as soon as I sat down and I started reading. All those old feelings of perfectionism came in. What are people going to think? You know, is this good enough? I don't know how to read. A lot of people don't know that I don't spell very well. I'm 43 years old, and I don't spell very well, and I don't know how to read very well.
Yeah.
And I've always had this fear about reading out loud. When I was in the fifth grade, we were reading some book, and the word was chaos, but I said chaos, and everybody in the class laughed. And that has been something that's been with me all that time. I mean, that was like 33 years ago. But, you know, I still have a little bit of insecurities about reading out loud. So as I'm reading these words, and you heard Joe, like he's in my ear.
Yeah.
And every time I mess up, he's correcting me. And so I think it hits a little bit of that, you know, fifth grade Jamil of when I said chaos and the word was chaos and everybody laughed and everything. So
It's almost like the teacher was like correcting you.
yeah, the teacher and my classmates and my
Yep.
friends and all that stuff. So, so I think just being a little bit more prepared mentally would have helped. Outside of that, I don't know that I would change anything. What's next is we show up again tomorrow. We knock out the second half of the book and make it good. And we're doing something special this time. Like, I wanted this whole project to be different. I didn't want it just to be a book. I don't know. Like, I love fables. So books like, of course, The Richest Man in Babylon, which I based my book, The Richest Man of Direct Sales, off of. Books like The Alchemist, where you just really have to be engaged in the story to understand what it is that they're saying. And so that's what I wanted this book to be like, but I didn't want my audio book to be like every other book either.
Yeah.
I wanted in between the chapters to almost do like a podcast style, to where I talk about the highlights, like what am I saying during this chapter? Like, what are the key components that I really want the listener to get out of actually listening to this? And so on Friday, in a couple of days, me and Jordan, who's producing the book, we're going to be sitting down probably right here and doing the podcast so that we can interject those in between each chapter.
Yeah.
So that's going to be dope. So just imagine finishing listening to chapter 1 and then getting to listen to like a podcast interview with me and Jordan about chapter 1.
Yeah, heck yeah,
Like,
that's
what
cool.
did I mean when I said,
Yeah.
when I'm talking about leverage? What do I mean when, you know, when I'm outlining this story of this precious stone? And to hear straight from the author, I think was going to be dope. So that's what's coming up next. I'm really getting excited about, you know, the direction of where this is going.
Yeah, heck yeah. I was going to ask you too, well, maybe without going too much into, because we want to wait for Friday.
Yeah.
But the differences in writing each book, right? Because I'm sure, because it's been 5 years since you've written the first one, right?
Yeah.
Or was that 5 years since you've written the second one?
I actually wrote the first book, Richest Man in Direct Sales, believe it or not. I wrote that in like 2017, 2018. And then I wrote the 12 shifts end of 2019, beginning of 2020. So yeah, I haven't written a book since 2020. So it's been a good, basically 5 years.
So my question was going to be, like, were there key moments to, like, in, how should I phrase this? Were there key moments in the writings of your book, right, that were just like kind of made that specific book what they were, right?
Yeah,
So, like,
for
for
sure.
example, when you look at different trilogies or different movies that come out,
Yeah,
right, like, they're obviously telling a story, but it's like, now here's the second one and here's the third one,
yeah,
and like, and I see interviews all the time where a lot of the actors talk about, oh no, like, my second time filming for part two was way different than my experience from the first one, because the first one we went through this and we went through that, and there
sure.
was, 3 a.m, late nights, and so, like, same for you. Do you feel like there was, like, leading up to the writings of these books, were there like key moments in your life at
Oh my
that time?
God, for sure. When I think back to The Richest Man in Direct Sales, what's so interesting about that book, T, is I never planned on that being a book. I just journal a lot. As you know, I'm up every morning like 3:30, 4 in the morning,
Yeah.
and I'm writing and I'm thinking, and I might see something on Instagram or Facebook, or I'm looking at Yahoo Finance every morning, and so I'm just always thinking. And I graduated with a sociology and a psychology degree, so I find myself always. We were just talking about this. Like, I'm always trying to figure out the why in things, and so I'm always writing, just trying to figure out why is this happening? How can it be better?
Yeah.
you know. And so with the richest man in direct sales, I was on a journey. I made a decision to become a millionaire in basically 2013. And I met that basically in 2018. But along the way, I was keeping a journal to Ezra at the time, my oldest son, because I wanted the whole journey started because of him. And so I wanted to leave him a roadmap as to what Daddy was doing to change the Frazier last name in the Frazier family finances. And so I'm just journaling. Hey, step number one, this is what I'm doing. Step number two, this is how I'm paying off debt. Step number three, this is how I'm going to make more money.
Wow.
Step number four, this is what I'm investing in. This is even the insurances that I'm buying. Step number five, hey, we got to get a house. Step number six, we're getting some rental property. I'm just telling him the game. I'm just laying it out for him. And I kept it in a journal, and I kind of forgot about it, to be honest with you. And then what led up to writing the 12 shifts, I knew I had to write that book because my life had transformed so fast. My success had transformed so fast. My business had been built so fast, which felt like it was a long time at the time, honestly. But when I look back at it, it was happening so fast. And I knew the components as to why that was happening. And I was starting to I wanted to help. Like, if a guy like me can be basically born on welfare, graduate college on welfare, come from a family that didn't have much, very little means, no margin, you know, come out of a 2-year depression, have a wife that was about to leave me, going to take our son as she should have. All these things, and now just a few years later, having not just financial transformation, but life transformation. And I was like, bro, I have to write down the steps that I've taken from my own vantage point and put it into a book so other people can find whatever it is they're looking for, which most of the time is just peace, happiness, and fulfillment.
Yeah.
We have all these things that mask what we do to try to find peace, happiness, and fulfillment and purpose. And so I knew from a moment that, like, I got to put this book out, but I was scared because, again, I didn't think I had the qualifications. I don't know how to spell. I don't read very well. And I didn't feel like I had proven enough in terms of success to be able to release that book. I went to a conference here in Arizona that some friends were putting on. I had like VIP seating. I was sitting next to these people, and a buddy of mine had just wrote this book, and he was on stage just crushing it. And months before, I told him that I also had a book that I wanted to write, and he challenged me. And he said, "Why don't you write it?" And I said, "I will." So when he came off the stage months later, he looked me dead in my eyes, Tony, and he said, "Did you write your book yet?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because I'm afraid." And he said, "Go outside right now, do a Facebook Live, and tell these people that today you've decided you're going to put the book out." And that's exactly what I did. And a few months later, as things happen, the universe conspires, people start coming into your life, you start meeting other people to help you put projects together. And that's how the 12 shifts came out. So much has happened from the time we released the 12 shifts, since I wrote the 12 shifts, finished it at the beginning of 2020. This was before COVID happened. Think about it.
Yeah.
I finished it in like January 2020, didn't release it until like September 2020. Released The Richest Man in Direct Sales early 2020. Released the 12 Shifts late 2020. Think about all the stuff that's happened, all the social political stuff that's happened, all the job layoffs that's happened, all of the business things that's happened. Look how much social media has changed since that time. And during this time, what I consistently have heard was only a certain group of people or a certain type of people can become wealthy, can build businesses, right? And I wanted to write a book that not only dispelled that myth, but showed you what are the steps in being able to do it on a much bigger level. And so that's how the Freedman and Oak Tree came through. I was listening to a podcast of some old timers, and I love Reconstruction era, you know, the time right after the Emancipation Proclamation,
Yeah.
that that allowed, you know, slaves to be freed. And I love it for a couple of reasons, because of the ingenuity these people really showed with being in captivity for 200 years.
Yeah.
And now they're free. Can you imagine that? Like, what do I do? I've never known freedom before. My mama was a slave. My daddy was a slave. My granddaddy was a slave. My great grandfather was a slave. I don't know. I have no agency. I don't know how to think for myself, how to work for myself. I never had anything to me. Everything that I've done has gone to somebody else. I've always had to listen to someone else. I can't read. I can't write. I'm illiterate. If I tried to learn how to read or write, I might get killed for it. What do I do? Can you imagine having millions of people like that all of a sudden have quote unquote freedom? And what these folks did over the next 10, 20, 30 years is a miracle. And so I look at that time period and I say, if you can figure out a way to start trending to become your best when people in society are at their worst, what is possible for the human being? You start to see your first black millionaires during that time. You start to see your first black banks at that time. You start to see the first black people in Congress at that time. You start to see black neighborhoods come together. You start to see black men and women raising families together. And if these folks can do it during those conditions, then we can do it in today's conditions. And so that really, listening to this podcast by Bob Johnson, I was just like, I want my voice to be a part of it. And I want to write a book that doesn't just talk about the problems, but gives solutions to the problem. So that's what inspired me to write The Freedman and the Oak Tree. But I wanted it to be a parable too. I didn't want it just to be. I didn't want it to be like the 12 shifts where it's like step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, all the way to step 12, do this. I wanted the reader to get engaged and get lost in the story, and has to really pay attention to get the wisdom that the story is giving them.
Yeah, no, and I think that's solid. What do I tell people with like the content and stuff that I shoot at the club, right? I told somebody, I said, I want to make it feel like they missed out every freaking time I drop a video. Like, if somebody's watching my stuff, whether it be like a mini documentary or anything, I want it to be like, dang, I should have been there, right? And so in this case, I could imagine being in that place where it's and you talk about it all the time, but like bigger picture stuff, right? Like, what are the why? I mean, obviously, it's a lot more in depth than that. You want to go into why people do certain things or why they do the things they do. But even with something as like reading a book, right? Like, people, they obviously love to read. Okay, why? Well, there's some that I feel like they maybe take some stuff from it. There's some that genuinely just like to be engaged into a book, right? And so I think that's solid, man.
Yeah, man.
The fact that people can walk away after reading your book and just be like, you know what, like. And then on top of that, the idea, that whole podcast idea, I love that. Because then you're kind of like summarizing not only the chapter, but you're hearing the actual guy that wrote it talk about, well, this is what I meant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
The key parts.
I think that's going to be transformational, man.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
I've never heard of people doing that. So that's going to be interesting.
Well, a big part about the book is leverage. You know, how to use leverage to impact more people, to make a bigger impact in the marketplace. I mean, just look at what we're doing. You know, like, I mean, you set up all this amazing equipment. Like, these people can't see it, but we got a mic here, a camera here, lights here, all this stuff, right? Some stuff over there, I have no idea what it is, mixers, all this stuff, right? Like, bro, I would be a fool to be trying to set all this stuff up and then come over here and try to talk and like do all this stuff. That's dumb. What I need to do is I need to go find people who work in their genius, who are already gifted at it, and then we come together, we collaborate, right? And then I can leverage my talents, my skills, you can leverage your talents, your skills, and then be able to go make a bigger impact. And so that's why one of the first things I always look to do is to build teams. And that's why chapter, 10 in the 12 shifts is always my favorite chapter. In fact, the Freedman and Oak Tree comes off of that chapter because that chapter is Find Your 12, which is obviously taken after Jesus's ministry, which I think is a ministry that shows you how to build businesses and how to move into leadership, how to do leadership correctly. How to have an impact correctly, how to impact the masses instead of just yourself or a small group of people. But how can you go impact millions of people? And the way that you do that is you utilize leverage. And you do that through systems, and you do it through people. And so that's why, I'm so excited about, this piece of work and being able to do the podcast in between each chapter, because I get to talk about that. Hey, I talked about leverage in this chapter, and they're like, why? And then you can break it down, right? And then the listener can go into the next chapter and get the wisdom out of that. So by the time they're done with this book, like, they should be able to know how to freaking build a huge business, how to build a huge brand, how to build, considerable wealth. And hopefully it starts to dispel the myths that only a certain type of person can do these things. Because I'm showing a recently freed, not slave, but come from ex-slave, being able to do this through their story. And if they can do it during that time, they can certainly do it during this time.
Yeah. Yeah. Heck yeah.
Well, I got a question for you, just piggybacking off of this. What do you think
Here we
about
go.
that? Do you think that anybody can build wealth?
Do I think anybody could build wealth?
Yeah.
That's a great question. Dude, before coming in and, working with the team and even under yourself, I would have never imagined it like in a million years. Now, I'm not saying that, I've personally built wealth, not yet. But, and I think we even talked about some of this on the way over here.
Yeah.
I'm like, my entire mentality has shifted, even, like working, like I will be completely honest. I get more out of the time, like being there, working with you at the house and than you probably get from me, and it's only because, of the way that I've grown up thinking, right? Like my thought process. I assumed, I mean, now I'm a lot older, but you were talking about how, those that were freed from slavery, how, their grandfather was a slave, their dad, and now this person, like, what do you do now? Yeah. My thoughts growing up were almost like, well, my dad was a gang member. My mom was a gang member, right? Like people in my family, they're part of gangs. They're in 2 or 3 different parts of the gangs in North San Diego County.
Sure.
So statistically speaking, right, I should have been a gang member. And that's where, like, I go back into like the mindset, right? Challenging like the way that I think. I know that it's definitely possible, especially with the things that I've been able to accomplish just in the last 2 or 3 years of my life.
Sure.
Man, I know that it can be done, right? It's just some people, I feel like maybe I don't need to be like have my hand held through everything, but there's one thing in particular in my family that's been generational, I feel like, is finances. One of the struggles that we've had is just finances.
Why?
Dude, I have a great question. I can, in my own head, I can go as far back as, different generations in my family.
Sure.
My grandparents growing up in Mexico and coming from, those times, back in the, 50s or 60s, or I forgot exactly what time they came over to North San Diego County. But I remember my grandfather telling me about the times like he grew up on the ranch with my great grandfather, and different things that they had to, endure growing up and being on the fields and all that stuff, to where eventually they came to a place where his siblings and, they came and started a business, and now they're, a good majority of them started building wealth and getting finances for themselves. But I feel like for my siblings and I'm not going to say everything was handed to us, but my grandfather made sure that we didn't really lack.
I see.
Which I'm extremely grateful for.
Right.
We honestly have had it a lot better than I'm sure, other people have in this country and even in the area that we live in. But again, I can go back to as far back thinking as like, if your mind is trained that like, okay, well, because your parents did this, that's how you need to be, or that's how you're going to be. Right. And, I remember having a conversation with my mom, and we had a very like serious time go down, like in my immediate family. And I remember one of my older sisters was, sharing her heart, and she was, opening up about some things, and, we're sitting there and we're crying, and immediately, not even to, put my mom down, but immediately her thing was like, well, this is how my dad was with us. I'm sorry that I didn't show you this love, or I'm sorry you didn't get this and get that. And immediately I took it as like, okay, now you're flipping it, right? My sister's trying to open up, and so she's gonna just draw back into her little shell, and she's not gonna open up like this no more. They already don't have the best relationship, and so going even to that, right? The fact that she said that, my instant rebuttal or my response was like, doesn't have to be that for the next generation,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case, I think it's the same thing with building wealth. You know, it's the same thing as how it was with my health and weight loss journey.
Sure.
Like, you know, people have been big in my family my entire life,
Right.
right? And it doesn't. I know for sure I don't want that to go to the next generation. My kids,
Mm-hmm.
you know, my future kids or the my future generation coming after me, because I know, man, the just the struggles that I personally had with all of it.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I think to answer your question, I for sure think anybody can build the wealth.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just all about placing the right people around you. You know, in this case, you know, I know the story very well. How you talk about that, you know, that mentor that you had when you were sitting outside that plaza, and you're like, you know, you had a sign how you can get people fit or get them healthy,
Mm-hmm.
and the dude came up to you and was like, all right, well, if you can, you know,
Yeah.
teach me or get me to lose over 100 pounds, I'll
Yeah.
teach you how to build wealth. Where it's like you won't even, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's like that in most cases. You know, I think a lot of times people, they just don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. Their mindset has a lot to do with it. It's like because, you know, they either suck at saving or they just actually don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a tremendous thing when you can find somebody that will take the time,
Mm-hmm.
right, and kind of walk you through it, or you know, go through it with you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big thing too.
Right.
When you can find some people that can go through that stuff with you, and that like now you guys are a team together, and now like, you know, you guys have essentially made it, right? You made it to whatever level.
Sure.
Then you're able to look around and be like, dang,
Yeah,
we did this.
We did this.
You know?
So I feel like I'm hearing from you like environment is key, repeating the same cycles, generational cycles. Like I was just talking about how important, and like somebody's got to be a chain breaker. And when you look at chains, it's just one link that connects to another one, that connects to another one, and connects to another one, so on and so forth. But at some point in time, somebody's got to break that damn chain and say, we're not doing this anymore. And I think, you know, like in my family, you'll have, I remember writing a post about this, and I was like, in every family, because I'm not, at least I don't feel like it, but I would say this: I understand gang members. I understand the necessities of it. I understand the social necessities of it. I understand why most people get in gangs. And I look at my family and the same thing. Like when I look at my cousins and uncles and all the people that's been in gangs, I understand it, right? Like I'm looking for something that most people are looking for, which is a community that loves them, that honors them, that respects them, and they could be a part of. Everybody wants to feel needed and valued and secured and loved and all that stuff, and we look to get it from different ways. So I'm like, all right, but at some point in time, somebody's got to break that chain. Somebody's got to break the chain
Yeah.
of obesity.
Has to.
Somebody's got to break the chain of poverty. Somebody's got to break the chain of freaking child molestation and predators. Somebody's got to,
Yeah.
at some point in time, we can't keep doing this anymore. Who's going to break it? And that's been my whole thing. Is like I've wanted to be a chain breaker for real. You know, I always looked at, even with being a father. We were just talking about this. How many fatherless households are out there? And it's just normal. You know, like it's normal for father not to be there, and now for mama to have multiple kids from multiple men. Like, don't even bat an eye. It just that's what it is.
Yeah.
Who's gonna break that chain? Who's going to stay with the one woman that's going to lean into their fatherly duties and responsibilities? And who's going to be there? And so I've just really have wanted to do all those things. You know what I wanted to do, and I'm still searching for it. I'm still trying to achieve it. I fall short a lot, but like I want to be uncommon. Like I want to be the guy who is well rounded and that checks all the different boxes, you know? And I think that really drives and motivates me. I hear that, and I'll be curious to see what you think about this. It's kind of an extension of the last question that I asked you. So, I'm a minority, apparently. I'm black. You're a minority. You're Hispanic with some other things mixed in there. So, is it possible when you hear, like, how should I phrase this? Okay, I've been told from a young age that it's not necessarily possible for someone like me to be wealthy. Somebody who grew up on welfare, from somebody whose father wasn't there, for someone whose mom was an addict, for somebody whose father sold drugs, for somebody who grew up on Section 8, food stamps, all that stuff. What I've been told is if somebody from that background did become wealthy, it was because they have either been lucky or they, what's the word that people use? They say they are, what's the word when you're like the small minority? They say that you
It's not like
made
privilege,
it
right?
out or something like that, right? Like you made it. I don't know what's the word. It's a phrase that they use. Not you made it out, but that you are not slipped through the cracks, but that you're the exception to the rule, right?
Yeah.
You're the exception to the rule. That you, gosh, this is gonna bug the hell out of me. But what do you think about that being the exception to the rule and just not just being the rule, like just be the rule? Do you think it's possible to just be the rule?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think you could ultimately be the rule, right? Like, for example, I know for sure that there's other minorities, right, that can take a look at your life, that have already looked at your life and said, you know what, man, if this guy could do it, I can too, right? And that trickles down to all kinds of stuff, right? That's how kids have this this fascination of, like, not even fascination, but their hungriness, right, to make it like out the hood,
Right.
and be, get drafted by the NFL, drafted by the NBA, right? Because they look at other people that have done it before them,
Right.
and they're like almost like models in a sense, where it's like, well, dude, this guy grew up in the same streets that I did.
Sure.
What makes him different? Because, he had his dad but not his mom, but I had my mom and didn't have my dad. Like, we're from the same area code.
Sure.
Our parents worked at the same job. They, you know what I'm saying? So I think ultimately, yeah, you can be that exception. And I think that when you do get to that place, that's where another shift has to take place in your mind, because now it's much bigger than just you.
Right.
Right now, it's not just your family and your kids and people that are coming after you, but I think it's other generations that are going to come. Like, and I think that's where I got to be careful with this. I don't want to say it's like that victim mentality,
Right.
but I think a lot of it plays a factor.
Well, why do you have to be careful with that?
I think it's just society today. They're so victimized that they hate that word, and it instantly just triggers them, right? Like, for my family, I'm just going to use my family as an example.
Sure.
I'm not going to use anybody else. I'm going to use my family. I'm sure that my mom, because she had my sister when she was about 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
And all of her friends in that time were still like in the neighborhood. They were ones still going and getting pregnant.
Sure.
They were the ones still going and dating around and having multiple dudes or whatever.
Right.
Right? And I remember my mom telling us about this, about how like she moved out the hood. You know, she
Mm-hmm.
wanted to move out the hood because it was like she wanted so much more, much better life than what she had growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so she could have easily played that victim mentality, though. It could have easily been like, well, dude, like everybody else around me is doing it.
Sure.
Like, you know, I'm such a minority, and if I don't ever see anything better for myself or my kids, then I'm just gonna stay stuck in it. You know, it's kind of the same in this sense. It's like we could have easily played that card where it's like, oh, well, dude, like they've been effing people over this entire time,
Right.
so many decades,
Mm-hmm.
right? And all these different minorities, and so I just think that, man, you get to a place in life where you get so hungry and so eager to want a better life that you'll do anything to just make it happen.
Sure.
You'll do anything to just get it done. And I think for me, if I'm not at that place yet, I'm definitely almost there.
Yeah.
And it's no shade to anybody that I grew up with, no shade to anybody even in my family.
Mm-hmm.
But my thing is just like how you said earlier. You left with these books, especially with the first one. You were just journaling, leaving steps on what you did to clear debt and to build wealth for yourself, so that when Ezra grows up, right, he has something that like, dude, okay, my dad did this, he modeled this. This is how we're gonna build our next generations to come.
Right.
I need that same thing, man.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I think about my family last name, the Aguilera last name,
Mm-hmm.
and I think about the different uncles that I have and different cousins that I've had that are part of the family business and are kind of doing their own thing, and they're doing great. And, you know, the good majority of them are successful. But I think for me, I'm now like, that was cool.
Yeah.
I give them their props.
Sure.
It's going to be way different for me. I got that last name, and I want to take it somewhere where it's never been to.
Right, you're changing the future of the last name.
Yep. And I think that's where it comes down to who's going to be that chain breaker.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about it in the car. I wanted to kind of touch on it too, maybe just very briefly, but you talked about that nucleus, right?
Yeah.
And you have like your internal community is in essence, right? Your family. And then you have the communal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your church, the
Mm-hmm.
people around you, your community.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's eventually, you know, to the state and the government or whatever. But yeah, I 100% agree. I don't think there's anything more important than changing it right there inside the family first.
Yeah, that's where it starts, man.
You know?
That's where it starts. Soft White Underbelly was the show that I was telling you that I'm literally hooked on now. I freaking hate them for making such good content. But you hear all these stories, story after story, of the most wild and crazy and fascinating and beautiful and just amazing stories. And the one common denominator that I see in all of these stories of people that were going, you know, right and automatically made a left-hand turn somewhere, and then just went from one poor decision to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, is their family structure. Something happened. The interviewer does such an amazing job. His first question is, where'd you grow up? And tell me about your family. And then he pretty much is quiet. And they start talking about family, and then you start to hear it. Boom, just like that. Here it comes. Here it comes. And dad wasn't there. Mom didn't show enough love. Some sort of child molestation, predation, cousin touched me here, I was sex trafficked, all these things, Dad said that he would show up and never came. You got that story, and so do I. You were waiting out front, and so was I. For you, it turned into what it turned into.
It turned into abandonment issues.
Abandonment, and for me, it was lack of trust and writing people off. If you lie to me, if you say you're going to do something, again, I still got it. If you say you're going to do something or you're going to be here and you don't, that's an issue for me. And I'm ready to, I would rather cut off a whole relationship than to go through with that. I'm 43 and that still shows up. Because I sat out front waiting for Dad to come. He said he was going to come at this time, and the dude never showed up. And so I built up these walls throughout my life with the ability to cut people off faster than you can say cut people off because of that trauma, right? So when I listen to these interviews, I'm like, man, so the nucleus is important. The family is important. The mom is important. Dad is important. And that's where it all starts, and everything cascades out from there. If I can come from a family where I'm supported, where I'm loved, where I'm valued, where I don't have to go outside of here to search for something because I'm getting it in here with abundance. I'm getting the hugs, I'm getting the love, I'm getting I'm getting the data boys, I'm getting the data girls, right? I'm showing up for the games, I'm having the family nights, we're talking through stuff. I'm getting the mentorship. If we don't get those things, then we look outside for it. And that's why I told you, I understand gangs. I understand why my Uncle Larry went to a gang. Both of his parents had died a month away from each other. Where am I going to find this sort of solitude, this sort of protection, this sort of love, this sort of understanding? I'm going to go wherever I can go, and I'm going to get it. Even if that means that I'm going to, be a threat to society. It doesn't matter. My search for love and acceptance is more than my ability to care about fitting in socially. And so I'm going to find it wherever I can. Here's what I think that's interesting. So, I think that somebody told me that they don't have enough money, they don't have enough disposable income. How can they build wealth? How can they become wealthy when they don't earn enough and they don't have enough disposable income? What do you think about that? What do you think about that? Valid or invalid?
I think their thoughts on it is valid. The only reason why I say that is because I'm very big on validating people's feelings and emotions, and right. But I think I've heard you talk about it one time. You talked about how that wasn't your fault growing up, right?
Yeah,
it's not our fault.
Sure.
So that's the only reason why I invalidate that. Now the invalid part is what are you doing to change that? Right? So the invalid part, for example, I have a friend of mine, a barber friend of mine. I have a bunch of them, but one in particular was talking to me about how, he's broke or he's this or he's that. And the dude is getting up at, late times during the day, when realistically it could be going in an hour or two early, 3 hours early, going in a cut, right? And so for him, it's the cuts are only X amount of dollars. They're not gonna. But when I flipped it into his perspective, and I was like, okay, imagine you get 2 extra cuts in the morning, a day, right? That's 10 a week, right? You multiply that by whatever you charge for cut.
Sure.
Bro, you just got to get your ass up.
Yes.
Get up 3 hours earlier.
Come on.
And if you're not at the shop, right?
Sure.
bring them to the crib,
Right.
especially on the weekends.
Right.
You know, like if
Yes.
if you know your shop is not open till 9, 10 in the morning or whatever,
Sure.
you should be having them come 6 in the morning,
Yeah.
6:30. You know, like, and so that's where I said it's invalid. You know, your thought process on it, your mentality for sure is validated because you know it wasn't it for me. It stems to that nucleus, right, the
Sure.
beginning, which yeah, it wasn't our fault.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like, how are you going to flip the script on that?
Sure.
And that's where it becomes invalid in a sense where it's like, dude, like, and I think that's why I learned so much from what you say in terms of like the direct sales,
Mm-hmm.
like how you can easily go and make 100 calls a day, and it'll like that will literally like fall into your lap, or not even into your lap, but it's because you went and you got it.
Right.
Nobody handed it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was like, "Oh, do you want to pick up an extra shift?" You know,
Yeah.
like, no.
Yeah.
That's where like it really, me personally, I feel like it stems on the person. It's like, okay, this is what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
why you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So then now you tell me why you can do it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll go ahead and show you, or I'll give you a bunch of different.
Sure.
And that's what I feel like this is. Like that's what I feel like you know, the Think Life is Different organization when it comes to teaching on building wealth and giving those steps.
Sure.
Right? Is you're essentially you're hearing people out as to like, because they all want to change something. They're obviously there for a reason, and I hear them. That when they come and they say, well, I'm, you know, X amount of dollars in the hole, or I'm this, or I'm that.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Like, and you're listening, right? You're listening to them give you however many reasons
Right.
as to why they can't build wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And then all they do is they listen to you maybe talk for about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And that entire hour is literally everything as to how they're going to,
Right.
and how they can build wealth.
Yeah, it's BS. People don't want to hear that though. I didn't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
At 31, if somebody was like, "Bro, what are you doing? You had a football scholarship. You had your school paid for. You make $100,000 a year, $112,000. Why the hell are you broke?" And you know what I would have did? Gave them all the reasons. Bro, the reasons would have been so fascinating. They would have been so good.
I bet.
I probably could have wrote a whole book about all the reasons. My wife, you know, and my friends, and now she's pregnant, and I grew up on welfare, and my mom, and you don't understand what my household was like. It's freaking weed all the time, and drugs and cocaine, and my dad wasn't there, and my dad had all these kids with all these other women, and I all the things. It would have been amazing. But it would have been so true to me. And if I had someone say, "Jamil, that's bullshit," I would have taken offense to that straight up. I would have been pissed. I would not have wanted to hear it. But it is. Because I told you once, I said it's all predictable. Poverty is predictable, middle class is predictable, wealth is predictable. All of it's predictable. Do you remember what I told you? How you can find out in advance where someone's gonna land?
I don't remember exactly like word for word, but I remember you telling me, because you asked me specifically about my weight loss. And you're like, okay, how did you know, or how did you know you were going to get to this point?
Sure.
Because I was working at it.
Yeah. What I told you was, all you have to do is, if you could just be a little fly on their shoulders for about 6, 9, 12 months, 2 years, and just be a fly on their, all you have to do is just look at what they do on a daily basis. And 24 months from now, wherever they land up, if somebody asks you, "Hey, Tony, are you surprised this person is where they're at?" And you're going to say, hell no. And they're going to say, why? You're going to say, because I've been watching them for the last 24 months. I've been with them all day long for the last 2 years. There's no surprise that they are where they're at right now, whether it's good or bad, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, whether it's rich or broke, whether it's an intellectual or somebody who can't read. Like, it's not going to be a surprise because you just watch what they do. When people come to me, and it doesn't matter, you've heard them, right? You see me on these calls. It doesn't matter if the person's making $500,000 a year or they're making 50,000.
Yeah.
They all have the same problems, and they all have the same excuses, and they all feel like I don't understand. You don't understand. It doesn't matter if they're making $1 million, 500,000, or 50,000. All have the same problems, right? Somebody could be making $20,000 a year, and I bet you, if I watch what they do, I will be able to say, that's why you've been staying here, right? Because I'm making 20, 25, but if I'm watching them, they're going to 7-Eleven, they're buying a bag of chips, they're buying a pack of cigarettes, they're figuring out how I can get some weed, we're figuring out, I see some Jordans. I'm just watching, right? I'm just watching. I'm going out, I'm getting the hair, I'm getting the eyelashes. I got to have a self-care day. I'm just watching. And I'm like, you don't have any disposable income. I'm watching it.
Watching you dispose of it.
I'm watching you dispose of it. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
Do you know that $30 a day or week or month can be invested? Do you know what that will do over the next 2, 4, 6, 10 years? And you're telling me you don't have disposable income? I'm watching it in the packs of cigarettes. I'm watching it with the drinking habits. I'm watching it with the eating out. I'm watching it in the clothes that you're buying. I'm watching it in the shoes. I'm watching it. I'm watching it go to stuff that's going to keep you where you're at and not go to stuff that's going to build wealth over time. Everybody can do this. I'm convinced that every single person can do it. Well, I'm not making any money. Let's figure out a way for you to start making money. And as soon as you start making money, I bet you we can build wealth. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Well, you don't understand. I do understand. Well, I have to live here. No, you don't. Well, I got to send my kids to the school. No, you don't. Well, I got to have these clothes. No, you don't. I got to have that suit. No, you do not. I got to have that watch. No, you don't, but you don't understand my friends. I understand you want to be broke. Because your actions are telling me what you truly desire. We'll always get that in which we want most. I've watched it my whole life. I've had so many family members that didn't have money still get the drinks that they want, still get the drugs that they want, still get the men that they want. You can always see what somebody truly desires by what they have. Always. Bro, do you know, I told you about this story. The power went out in my neighborhood and I had to go to Starbucks and I met a homeless guy.
Homeless dude, right? Yeah.
Right? And he didn't have any money. He had to think of hustles on the street so that he could get $1,500 a month. Guess where $1,000 to $1,200 of those dollars went every month? Where'd it go to? His weed addiction.
His habits.
Do you know what could happen if you invest $1,200 a month? Over the next, $1,200 a month is freaking like $12,000 to $14,000 a year.
Now, how do you break that down? Just not to deviate from the story. How do you
Right.
break that down, like even like on a monthly? Because like for me, right? And I
Sure.
think we've had conversations about this where I'm like, okay, you're talking about in a span of like 30 years, because I know that you love using 30 years,
I
right?
do.
Um, on a monthly basis, if
Hmm.
somebody were to invest, let's just say even 500 or
Sure.
save 500, right?
Sure.
And you're in one of the high yield savings or one of the investments accounts, like what's a realistic return on that monthly?
If they're investing $500 a month, then they're investing $6,000 a year.
Hmm.
Okay. If they invest $6,000 a year in 10 years, that's 60,000. That's 120,000. That's 180,000 that they're going to invest over a 30-year time period.
Hmm.
They should look to earn anywhere from 8 to 12% return that's compounded
Hmm.
on that 100 and some thousand. In 30 years, if they're doing that, then they should have a net worth of at least $1 million.
Hmm. Now let's just say that's investments,
Sure,
right? Let's just say with like savings,
sure,
you're saving 500 a month,
right.
right? And like a not like your typical little ordinary savings accounts, because
Yeah.
now I'm like, dude, those aren't worth nothing.
Mm-hmm.
After, especially after hearing you.
Well, you want to save, but you don't want to save too much.
Mm.
You don't get wealthy by saving,
Mm.
and you don't get wealthy by working. You get wealthy by investing.
Mm.
So you want to save enough just so you can have a nice little nest egg
Mm.
in case shit hits the fan. So you want to figure out, what are my monthly expenses? My monthly expenses are $3,000 a month. Okay, let me put away 3 to 6 months of that monthly expenses. So let me save maybe 9 to 18,000, have that on the side. But then after that, I'm not saving anymore. All my money is going towards investing.
Investments, yeah.
Because my saving, even if I put that into a high yield bank, it's going to maybe give me 4% on my money,
Mm.
which is good. Like you said, a standard bank is going to give you not even 1%,
Yeah.
less than 1%, 0.001%, which is nothing. So 4 or 5% I'll take, but that's not going to make me wealthy,
Mm.
right? That's what we call a low risk savings, a low risk investment.
Mm.
You want to try to find some investments that's going to give you 10% return, 20% return, 30% return. At 30% return, I told you if you put away $500 a month over 30 years, we should be right around $1 million. I'm calculating that off of a 10% return on average.
Mm.
Bro, if I was to calculate that same dollar amount on a 30% return, you would have more like 6 or 7 million,
Mm.
possibly higher than that.
Yeah, so it's a 30% return on your $500 investment.
Right.
Yeah.
On average, which we're not likely to get, but I'm just saying that's the power of the
Yeah.
percentages. So that's why we want to invest, because even on average, if I can get about a 10% return, bro, that is so much higher than just saving money at a 4 or 5% return.
Mm.
So that's why investing is so important, because you get that money that gets compound interest. And so you want that money to grow for as long as it can. That's why we want to start as early as we can.
Mm.
So I think what happens is people say, well, bro, I only have $100 to invest a month. And I'm like, what do you mean only? Because they don't value that $100. They
Mm.
see it as being really small. This is why the Bible says, do not despise the days of small beginnings, right? In Zechariah, don't despise the days of small beginnings, because the Lord rejoices to see the work be done.
Mm.
And the work is working for the money and putting that money away. And then watch it start compounding. It's amazing what $100 compounded would do. And so one of the fallacies is, man, I only have $25, I only have $50, I only have $100 to put away. $100 a month, if you put away $100 a month, that's $1,200 a year. If I put away $1,200 a year for 40 years, compounded at 10% interest, I'm going to have maybe 3, 4, 500,000. And if I don't need it, like I said, somebody's got to break the chain. Then I can pass that down to my kids. And if they start with 200,000, 200,000, 200,000, and they let that compound for the next 30 years, well, then their kids are going to start with freaking 4 million.
Yep.
If they let that compound for 30, 40 years, then their kids will start with, but somebody's got to break the chain to stop making excuses. Yeah, that's a great place to end it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say pray like it depends on God, but work like it depends on you.
Jeez.
Yes, sir.
My God.
Yes, sir.
And that's a wrap.